Life means suffering, early death, and hunger for most of human existence. The dark stuff of life is, similarly, a well-loved theme in story and song. So, join me as we indulge in the dark side of ancient history. Ancient Light. On this show, I'm going to talk about various ancient topics. Very briefly, actually, but all with a dark theme. And I want to use two devices to do this. The first is a meter derived from the Japanese, which is haiku. 575, if you will. And the second is a type of haiku a friend of mine developed called kurai haiku, or dark haiku. This kurai haiku that I've heard so far ranges from merely forlorn to raging evil. I thought it would be nice to explore ancient topics through this medium. So it's a chance to portray the dark and sinister of my area of expertise. In a past episode, I've used the sonnet format with a poem called Young Gods, and in the future, I'll play with other forms as well. But now I want to indulge in the fusion of kurai haiku and ancient light. So I'll read a haiku, a dark haiku, and then I will give a historical background to the piece, briefly. And I have three themes that have emerged after I've written these, which are daily life, religion, and war. War. Scythian sniper. Patrolling high wall. Quick and precise he let fly. Arrow stuck in eye. The Scythians were considered a nomadic people north of Greece. The city of Athens employed male Scythian bowmen to patrol the walls which surrounded the city. And at certain eras, the wall itself continued south of the city to the coastline, to a port town where they kept the famous Athenian triremes. Scythians, employed by the Athenians, would walk the top of the walls with their small, curled bows, and could shoot downward, which you can imagine the advantage of a downward shot onto the enemy. Parthian shot. The Parthians flee, turning round on their saddles. Pull, bow, release, soul. The Parthian shot, a parting blow. A famous term for a strike made as someone retreats. The Persian Parthians had a horse-riding warrior who would motivate the rapid advance of an opponent by retreating on their horses. As the enemy advanced into the vacuum of the retreat, the Parthians would turn their torsos as their hips and legs continued to hug the charging horse, and fire their arrows into the rapidly advancing enemy. The enemy and arrows are both flying toward each other. An advanced combat technique indeed. In striking arts, one uses a trick where he gets the opponent to duck right into an uppercut. The head meets the hand in one powerful moment of impact. Spartan sword. The short Spartan sword. Why is it so small, you ask? Easy to reach. Heart. The Spartans had their own style of sword, which was slightly shorter than the norm. Spartans are often illustrated with a Macedonian-style sword, which has a slight curve. The Spartan sword we are discussing was straight and short. Since Greeks specialized in phalanx combat, the spear was the main weapon in such a battle. The sword was an important weapon to draw after the initial dash when the two sides are in chaos and inside of spear range. One could draw the sword while his hoplite shield was pressed against the enemy. If your sword was too long, you would not be able to draw it and use it to drive under the opponent's armor into their vitals. Captured city. A morning battle. Husband, brothers, and sons dead. Girls await shackle. After a battle, the victor would often slay all the men and haul off the women and children to sell into slavery. Coward on the front line. Blamed for all their deaths. You could not hold the front line. How do you still live? Most Greek hoplite warriors were farmers. Spartans were an exception. They lived in the barracks, professional full-time soldiers they were. The front line of the phalanx and the entire unit would be fellow landholders in one territory. You'd be serving with your fellow countrymen, people you have known your whole life, your neighbors and relatives. In phalanx-style combat, the front line must hold against the enemy to prevail in the initial stage of battle. To break a unit is to crash the front line and divide the unit into smaller parts to be picked off, or who will retreat in disarray. If the front line doesn't hold, and a member of the front line is alive while everyone else dies, you could see how this would be met with suspicion. Daily life. Fresh slave. A pretty young thing, last seen wandering the coast. Father calls her name. Slavery could be a lucrative trade, even for those who did not specialize in it. One could kidnap a pretty girl and sell her for a pretty penny. The Greek classical tradition is filled with abduction scenes, often near the coast. Then again, ancient Greek life was hardly ever far from the sea. Those landlocked Arcadians might disagree. Barren wife. Worry at her loom. Barren wife. Pregnant slave girls worry at her womb. The Greek wife was often depicted at her loom. I often imagined how the wife could spend her anxiety and worry there, working out her pains while threading at the wheel or weaving back and forth like a spider busily building a web. Mind slave. Life in the light deny. Moving closer to Hades. Inching day by day. There were ancient slaves who were like family members, but there were slaves whose youth were wasted away in the mines, extracting precious metals, usually for a king or a city, who often hire a contractor to supply the labor. This contractor could harness and hire large amounts of slaves for major projects. In many ways, the ancient world was built on the backs of slaves. An agora well. Layers of small bones, filling up the old dried well, born from womb to tomb. This information is from a lecture I went to at the University of Missouri. Archaeologists had excavated a well outside the marketplace region of Athens, Greece. The well contained layers of bones of children at various ages. In one area, a zone of 4 years, there were dog bones among the children's bones. It was not uncommon to sacrifice a dog upon someone's death. There was much more dog sacrifice in the ancient world than most realize. In some beliefs, both Greek and Assyrian, dogs had healing benefits. There are temple grounds where dogs were either sacrificed or kept as holy, that have scores of their bones buried on the grounds. As for the children's bones, some died at birth, some killed by exposure, but others grow a while and then die from something else. It was some sort of tradition all those decades to bring children and dump them in the dry well. Religion. Sailor lost at sea. Sailor lost at sea. If he dies before return, soul will always roam. A common fear among sailors, rowers in the Navy, and family members back home. If one is not buried in their homeland, the soul will wander looking for it. Once, the Athenians put some of their own generals on trial for not recovering the bodies of drowned Athenian sailors. The religious horror of the families must have been especially hair-pulling and breast-gnashing. Dead God. Dead God in a well. Forgotten terracotta. Water drips on face. Many of the gods we remember were once only local gods of a particular city. Some gods are simply a result of combining several localized gods into one to synchronize them. Who can know the countless forgotten gods? I once had a dream I was floating on a boat along an underground stream where lining the walls were idols of thousands of gods tucked away in their own nooks, as if they still remain in some sort of collective memory where one can go visit. I remember reading a passage in the Christian Apocrypha as a young teenager where the god Baal was banished into a well. Since then, the image has stuck with me.